Could Jacoby Brissett beat out Sam Howell in Washington? All that and more in this episode of Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. Kate, training camps have officially opened up across the NFL. And we've got some training camp battles that we want to talk about at the quarterback position. Let's start in Washington, because when I proposed this question to you, like who's going to win this job, I think you were actually a little surprised that I even asked you. So Sam Howell versus Jacoby Brissett. Who do you got?
I think it's going to be end of season, probably Jacoby Brissett.
I actually thought you said the opposite.
It does pain me to say that because I really like Sam Howell. But if Jacoby Brissett, and like let's just say Jacoby Brissett kind of repeats what we saw out of him last year, where I mean maybe not a ton of upside, but provided the Browns offense a lot of stability when Deshaun Watson was out with suspension. Like his 17-game pace, he was on pace for over 4,000 yards, 19 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Like he was fine. He was a pretty solid game manager when asked to do so. And like, let's be honest, we saw, like Amari Cooper absolutely thrive in games when we actually saw him with Jacoby Brissett, 16 fantasy points per game in comparison last season to what we saw when Deshaun Watson was under center, 11.6 PPR points per game. I do think overall Jacoby Brissett is probably like the better option for this team, but I'm sad because I really like Sam Howell and I really like him for fantasy, and I really like the upside that he's got with those little legs of his.
I'm on the same page with you. Like, I think obviously if you want one of these two quarterbacks to be like your super flex option, you want it to be Sam Howell, right? Just because he gives you that rushing upside. He's so young. He's 23 years old, 24 years old. That's the better option. But if you're looking at this from which of these quarterbacks gives Terry McLaurin a higher floor and a higher ceiling, which one gives Jahan Dotson a higher ceiling? I think it's Jacoby Brissett. But the other issue is Jacoby Brissett's not a long-term answer. And I think Washington knows that. And I think that's why ultimately we're going to see Sam Howell start the season. And I think they're going to basically force him to fail before they go to Brissett. At least that's my read on the situation.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't heard a ton. There was like kind of this sense that Washington had committed to Sam Howell, but it doesn't feel like that commitment was all that strong. It felt like it was more of a by default, not because we are in love with Sam Howell. It felt like Sam Howell's the guy in the room right now, kind of.
I mean, he was the last one left, right? Because Taylor Heineke left in free agency. It was really just Sam Howell. I wonder, Kate, if this is what happened. They kind of, with Ron Rivera back in February, March, announced Sam Howell as a starter. And then they signed Jacoby Brissett, who is widely loved across the NFL. Like his teammates absolutely love him. He's just very consistent day to day. And I wonder, the longer that he's been in that organization, I just wonder if it's like, hey, maybe we shouldn't just give this job to Sam Howell right away because everybody loves Jacoby so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great signing for the organization. Sam Howell last season played one game, did win it over your Dallas Cowboys.
The C team of the Dallas Cowboys.
19 pass attempts, completed 11 of them for a sub 60% completion rate. But again,
One game.
what was intriguing was that those 5 rush attempts for 35 rushing yards and a touchdown, which we saw him run a little bit in the preseason too. So I do think that coming out of the draft, it almost had the comp for me was like a blend between Baker Mayfield and Russell Wilson. And we saw a little bit of those legs complement that comp a bit. So like the ceiling's there, but if you have the receivers on this team, I think you want Jacoby to be the guy.
I think so as well. I will say Sam Howell has the rushing upside is what we like here, right? Like there's a chance if he's the starter, he's a high-end QB2 for you every week because of that rushing upside. And he's always been a pretty good goal line runner. Like he just has a really good sense of how to get into the end zone when they get down there. They can use him in quarterback sneaks. I'm going to be curious to see how Eric Bieniemy uses these two quarterbacks and which one he prefers, because obviously Jacoby Brissett is fantastic at quarterback sneaks, but not really a rushing threat, right? Like that's just not his game. Does he want somebody who's a little bit more mobile that can get out and throw on the run, that can do some of this stuff? We'll see. But I do get the sense that it's going to be Sam Howell early, and if he struggles at all, Jacoby Brissett's going to come in and give them a really high floor.
I agree. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one to see shake out because I don't have a ton of Terry McLaurin shares, which you do, but I have a lot of Sam Howell shares. So we're kind of at odds here with what we need out of this team. And I have a feeling a lot of our listeners are too.
So we're going to talk about some other quarterback battles coming up in a little bit. But to me, Kate, this is the one that feels like we don't have a clear-cut leader in the clubhouse. We're going to talk about Baker Mayfield versus Kyle Trask and some of these other ones that are decided kind of already. But this one, it really feels like this is a camp battle, and whoever plays better in training camp and the preseason is going to win this job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Last thing before we move on, there's also 2 other quarterback jobs that we're going to mention. There is the Bryce Young versus Andy Dalton, and there's Anthony Richardson versus Gardner Minshew. I think in both of those cases, I think you just default to the rookie, and maybe they don't start week 1 or whatever, but it feels like by week 4 at the very, very latest, both those rookie quarterbacks are going to be starting, right?
Yeah, I think, especially for Anthony Richardson, like he desperately needs experience, I think. And I feel like we sort of saw the writing on the wall, when the 49ers decided not to get Trey Lance, a quarterback who also desperately needed some reps. Those reps, like you don't want to miss your window to properly evaluate your quarterback. And I think that's what we're going to see with these rookies after the kerfuffle that we've seen in the past. But I mean, all things, indicated, especially in Carolina, that Bryce Young has looked very impressive so far in the minimal reps he's had. We'll see how training camp shakes up, but I just don't think either of these teams have anything to lose throwing their rookie in the ring.
It seems like they're going to want their quarterbacks to grow and kind of get the growing pains out of the way. So by 2024, they can make serious runs. And I think in the case of both the Panthers and the Colts, they both play in really weak divisions. So it would not be surprising at all if they're rather competitive right away. Let's get to another training camp battle. This one a lot less sexy than Sam Howell versus Jacoby Brissett in Baker Mayfield versus Kyle Trask next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's so easy to add a job post. All you have to do is add your job and then the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty podcast, not Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Dynasty podcast. We want to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, Matt and Ryan can look at some of the running back battles that we have going into training camp. So make sure you tune in for that. But today we are continuing our quarterback preview, getting you ready for camp. And let's talk about Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield versus Kyle Trask. Mayfield is a free agent signee. Kyle Trask is the former second-round pick. How do you see this one playing out?
I'm kind of at a loss for this one because I'm not sure that either of them is going to be able to really win the job, right? Like with their play. In the limited reps we've seen so far, it was kind of like duck, duck, goose. Only it was duck, 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 like that.
I like it.
That's the game that they were playing here in Tampa Bay. And I don't know that either of these guys is going to come out and win the job necessarily, but I think Baker Mayfield has that clutch factor, has some of that swagger that I think might get him the starting position, even if he's I just don't think either of these guys is the best option. But I think it'll be Mayfield. How about you?
Last year in Week 18, Tampa Bay had the division already wrapped up. They were resting starters. They had an opportunity to play Kyle Trask in an absolutely meaningless game, and they didn't. They played Blaine Gabbert instead of him, which basically told me everything I needed to know about Kyle Trask, right? Like, you don't even want to see him play at all in a meaningless game. It means you have no hope that he's going to be ready. We're going into year 3 now for Kyle Trask.
And we already knew what Blaine Gabbert was.
Yep.
So that wasn't a question here.
Yeah. However, that doesn't mean that we're not going to see Kyle Trask this year. I think Baker Mayfield is going to start the year. But over the last couple of years, we've seen that Baker Mayfield has struggled to stay on the field. And even when he's on the field, he's not a lock to continue to start. Like in Carolina, they gave up quite a bit to get him, and he was released 2 months into the season. I think we'll see both quarterbacks this year. But my question to you is, if you have Mike Evans, if you have Chris Godwin in your dynasty leagues, who do you want to start?
In that case, I'm probably hoping for Baker Mayfield. And overall, we've seen a lot of ups and downs, right, from Baker Mayfield throughout the course of his career. But generally speaking, Baker Mayfield, I think, has kind of been underrated as a deep passer. Hasn't necessarily played with the best talent. I think we can all agree that OBJ was not the right fit for him. But
nope. Jarvis Landry was, which is weird, right? Like
Jarvis Landry was the guy, though. And I think, when you're looking at the fact that Jarvis Landry played out of the slot, like that translates very well to the game that we can see out of, Chris Godwin. I think there's a lot of options here, but Mayfield has shown some oomph for the deep ball when he was healthy. So maybe that can translate to some interesting value here for Mike Evans, who just keeps having 1,000 receiving yard seasons. Like, can he do it again?
I think it's weird. Like, I think you're right. Like, if you have Chris Godwin, I 100% want to see Baker Mayfield, because that's one area that Baker's really good is getting the ball out of his hands quickly, getting it to the slot receiver. I think Mike Evans will be fine with Baker Mayfield, but part of me just wonders, like, could Kyle Trask maybe just give him a little bit more YOLO balls? Like, that's kind of what Kyle Trask did at Florida, was just throw the ball down the field. He's not really a mobile guy. Maybe there's something there to be unlocked. However, there's like a 5% chance that happens. So I think it's probably Baker for the other dynasty assets. Well, including like the running back. Like, I think Baker's probably just going to throw to Rachaad White a lot, right? Like that's probably the most likely outcome. And that's why I do think Baker's going to win that job.
Yeah. Again, like I said, I don't think either of these guys is going to win it necessarily, but
one's definitely going to lose it for sure, right?
Yes. Nobody's going to win it, but one guy will lose it.
Yes.
And that's the way to look at this backfield, is that, or this entire quarterback competition, there are no winners,
No,
only
only
losers.
losers. A couple more. We'll run through this one just really quickly. We were talking this morning about Desmond Ridder versus Taylor Heineke. You and I both fully expect Desmond Ridder to open the season as a starter. But in your eyes, what are the chances that Taylor Heineke supplants Ridder as a starter at some point this year?
I feel like it's kind of likely. I don't necessarily. Again, coming out, I really like Desmond Ridder. I think in terms of his like field processing, I thought he was above and beyond the other quarterbacks in his class, but um, you know saw some stumblings right in his first couple of starts, started to improve as the season went on. But I do think that Taylor Heineke is one of these quarterbacks like a Jacoby Brissett, who maybe generally is relegated to a backup role, but he's, I think, been talented enough and been proven enough that when he's been asked to step in, he does quite well. So I would not be surprised at all if this team finds itself on the cusp of a playoff berth, by virtue of winning the NFC South, which is generally uncompetitive. I wouldn't be surprised if they're that close to it and then look and say, like, Taylor Heineke might be the guy that can better manage this offense. And that's coming from somebody who really likes Desmond Ridder. So
it's fascinating to me, Kate, because I think Arthur Smith likes to play a conservative, balanced attack on offense, right? And I actually think Ridder gives them, because of his mobility, he makes them just a little bit more dangerous with those weapons in that run game. But I do wonder if we'll get to a point where I think Ridder's just a conservative quarterback by nature. And maybe Arthur Smith feels like, hey, we need a little bit more playmaking, somebody that's going to be a little bit more aggressive. And that's kind of Taylor Heineke. Like, Heineke is not afraid to throw the ball up to his receivers and let them try to win the ball in the air. And when you have a 6'5" Drake London, a 6'5" Kyle Pitts, you've got Mac Hollins as one of your other receivers who's 6'5". Like, maybe Heineke is just a better fit with this offense because he has no fear and he will be aggressive. But again, you're losing the rushing part of this as well. So I think it's going to be Ridder, but I'm with you. I would not be surprised if Heineke starts a high number of games this season.
ugh.
I know.
All of these quarterback battles are not pretty, Marcus.
Yes.
These are not pretty battles to be discussing.
Well, there is one pretty battle that I'm excited about that I don't think people are talking quite enough about. We will get to that one next. All right, Kate, this morning I sent you over a list of some quarterback battles that I was interested in, and that obviously included Sam Howell versus Jacoby Brissett. We talked about Desmond Ridder versus Taylor Heineke. We should also mention Brock Purdy versus Sam Darnold versus Trey Lance, but that one really just feels as simple as if Brock Purdy's healthy, he's going to start.
Yeah, I don't really think there's a whole lot of competition there. If Brock Purdy is not fully healthy to start the season and isn't ready for week 1, that might be a different conversation. But I still think, if Brock Purdy is healthy, he is the clear leader in this team. We've already seen this locker room kind of commit to Brock Purdy, which is pretty incredible. So maybe not the necessarily like a high bit of upside for fantasy, I don't think, especially coming off an elbow injury, but
He was useful as a fantasy quarterback last year when he played.
was, but on the back of absurd efficiency. And I'm not going to bank on a quarterback coming off an injury to his throwing elbow to continue posting, that kind of touchdown production and that kind of efficiency. But yeah, that doesn't even feel like a real debate anymore.
No,
who's your pick for QB2 at least?
Darnold.
I think Darnold provides them a lot more safety.
Yeah.
But what's the ceiling with Sam Darnold? We've heard some good things.
The 49ers view it pretty high. They tried to trade a first-round pick for him like 2 years ago. They really, really wanted him. So Kyle Shanahan obviously loves him. We'll see. The one that I wanted your thoughts on is one that I don't think people are talking about enough. It's Mac Jones versus Bailey Zappi. Now, Mac Jones is going to start week 1. However, I am not convinced that Mac Jones is going to be the starter all year long because he's so much more talented than Bailey Zappi. He's got such a bigger arm. He's more mobile, but there's something about Bailey Zappi's game that's a little fun and provides a little bit of a spark. And it seems like Bill Belichick saw that last year as well in the game against Green Bay. There was a Monday night game they played against Chicago where Bailey Zappi came in, scored a touchdown right away, and then the wheels fell off. But I'm
And
just saying,
all of Twitter burned down,
I know.
begging for Bailey Zappi to return, which was a turn of events I never saw coming.
But I'm just saying, I wonder if Bill Belichick looks at Bailey Zappi and is like, you know what? There's something here. There's a little bit of a gamer part of him that he just gives our offense a little bit more life than Mac Jones. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's interesting because you look at like their efficiency metrics last season. Both of them were playing, in not such a great offensive system. This is going to be, Mac Jones. This is his third offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
In his short time in the league, like that's a lot to adjust to. And I think, having Matt Patricia as your offensive coordinator, like not going to be the best move. But when you're comparing Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones 1-for-1, Bailey Zappi was the more efficient quarterback. Had a 70.7% completion percentage, 8.5 yards per attempt to Mac Jones's 6.8. Outranked him in PFF passing grade, NFL passer rating, adjusted completion percentage. Like there was, I think a lot of, oomph that Mac Jones was missing. And we interestingly heard, I feel like there was a lack of confidence there for Mac Jones in year
And that's the thing
2.
for me is like Bailey Zappi does not lack confidence. Like he lacks arm strength, he lacks athleticism, but it's not confidence. And I
Yeah.
do think Bill Belichick and Bill O'Brien, they're going to want the guy that feels like he can rise up the level of everybody else around him. And I just wonder if we won't see. Let me give you a prediction. I think we're going to see a preseason game this year where Bill Belichick starts Bailey Zappi with the starters just to see how it goes, right? Like I'm going to give him, 6 drives, and I just want to see what happens when he plays with those guys. And Twitter is going to lose their mind.
All right. I'm banking on this. I need this to happen because I need all of Twitter or X.
Yeah,
Apparently is now what it's called. But
sure.
I want to see the world react to this. But again, I don't think like Bill Belichick's not going to be the guy that digs his heels into the ground just because they utilized a first round pick on Mac Jones. Like that's not their style. They're going to go
did it
with
with
the guy that
Drew Bledsoe, right?
yeah, like they moved on pretty quickly and they were fine. And they went with their late round rookie, and guess what? It
worked out. But just to be
out.
clear, if you have Juju Smith-Schuster or you have whoever, Devontae Parker, just the options are so terrible at receiver. I want Mac Jones to be the starter. I think he gives you the most upside, right? Because I think he can drive the ball down the field. He is going to be your pocket passer. He gets rid of the ball quickly.
And you've got a couple of decent pass catching tight ends too. Added Mike Gesicki this offseason.
Yep.
Hunter Henry will return. There are some decent options. It's not a good receiving core, but it's a decent room.
Yeah, there's nobody that like you're excited to start, but there's not a lot of bad players in the group, right? Like Tyquan Thornton entering year 2. I really liked him last year before he got hurt. Devontae Parker was actually pretty effective when he got targeted. It's just, again, it's nobody that makes you go crazy. And I think Mac Jones helps you have at least a pretty solid floor there.
Yeah, and like neither of these players in general are players that I want, especially because they're not. They are your prototypical pocket passers, and that's not always conducive for fantasy football. But that's where we're at with this team right now, and that's the type of quarterback that Bill Belichick is rolling with. So
Absolutely.
we've got to roll within the confines here, but I'll be very interested to see because that was not a quarterback battle on my list whatsoever. But I understand the draw and the appeal of seeing what you have in him, especially after the way we saw Mac Jones struggle in year 2.
And it wouldn't be a shock at all. Bailey Zappi in year 2, make a step up, has a new offensive coordinator, Bill O'Brien, who really prioritizes getting the ball out quickly and accurately. So what Bailey Zappi does really well. So keep an eye on that one throughout training camp and throughout the preseason. And if Mac Jones struggles, don't be surprised to see him in the lineup. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Again, every dayers, Matt and Ryan will be back tomorrow to talk about the running backs that they are the most excited to watch in some battles. So make sure you tune in for that. Go follow the show on YouTube, Locked On Dynasty. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk or X or whatever you call it now. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we'll see you guys next time.